Vertigo, The Woman Who Lived Twice. This is a vinyl that was pressed recently, actually in 2017. Obviously, it's a re-release of the soundtrack of the very famous Vertigo. I always insist, Vertigo, not Vertigo. It means vertigo, clearly. It was then re-released recently when it was restored in 1998, if I'm not mistaken, released worldwide under the title of Vertigo, in fact, but it's English, not Latin, so Vertigo and not Vertigo, which anyway means vertigo. In Italian, this film, as you know, was titled The Woman Who Lived Twice, which is one of Alfred Hitchcock's most beautiful titles, particularly in the Italian version. This is a soundtrack written, obviously, by the immense, great Bernard Herrmann, who had, from 1955, so 3 years earlier, already collaborated with Hitchcock, starting from The Trouble with Harry, who for Hitchcock would write his most beautiful scores. He finished his career with Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese in '75. It was posthumous, including the soundtrack, because he passed away that same year. In this edition of Vertigo, they've actually added a whole series of extra tracks from Alfred Hitchcock's films. So it's not just the soundtrack of The Woman Who Lived Twice. On the A side of the vinyl, we have Prelude and Rooftop, which is basically the opening part where there's a chase scene on the rooftops of San Francisco, Madeline and Carlotta's portrait, which is one of the love themes, the beach, farewell, and the tower, and the nightmare and dawn. While on the B side of this beautiful edition, they've added some of Hitchcock's previous films' soundtracks. So included is the Funeral March for a Marionette, which is, let's say, the one Hitchcock chose as his soundtrack for the TV episodes he produced. He personally directed 20 of them, but there are 266 for Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and about 80 for Hitchcock's Hour, in short, a lot. The theme song by Diane Lamb for Murder, which is essentially Dmitri Tiomkin's perfect murder of a 54, that of Rope from 1948, which is the very famous Lump in the Throat, The Trouble with Harry, the Italian Conspiracy of the Innocents, of 55, which is the first score that Bernard Herrmann wrote for an Alfred Hitchcock film. And then we also have that of Franz Waxman for Rear Window of 54, which is the very famous Rear Window. And again, Dmitri Tiomkin for Strangers on a Train, which has two titles in Italian, Crime by Crime, but also The Other Man. The original title is Strangers on a Train, or also Stranglers on a Train, because Hitchcock has fun on a poster removing an R in short. This is a vinyl that costs, among other things, a ridiculous price, it seems to me, to have paid for it. For about 27 euros, something like that. It's really a great buy because it contains the soundtracks of the most famous Hitchcock films. God, many are missing. For instance, all the extraordinary work that Bernard Herrmann did for The Man Who Knew Too Much in '56 is missing. Even for the '59 International Intrigue, North by Northwest, for Psycho in '60, obviously a lot of stuff is missing. But this is not the complete soundtrack because indeed Side A is all Vertigo, Side B, a lot of other films. If you want the complete soundtrack for Vertigo, there's also a score. That's what the symphonic soundtrack is called in English and soundtrack. But if there are forms of songs, you can find it on eBay, on Amazon, you know. And there's a beautiful old edition of this vinyl, not with this artwork, but with the two main characters, James Stewart and Kim Novak on the cover, which is a vinyl record from 1958 that I've been searching for very hard for a while now. But the thing is, it's often a bit overpriced. Anyway, this is the perfect record to rediscover a beautiful and very famous record, which, even if you think you don't know it already, because it's been used so many times, even in commercials. Soundtrack by the great, immense Bernard Herrmann, who before John Williams, before Danny Elfman, before Morricone, and maybe together with Minnesota, was surely the greatest composer in history of Vertigo film music.